Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and today we are going to be looking at noses, specifically the Emperor's nose and the Imperial Dignitary's nose, because if there's one thing you know if you collect Star Wars figures, those two guys will have nose rubs, and I get asked all the time what colour paint I should use to repair them, so that's what we're going to be doing today. Let's get straight on with the project. So what is the issue? Well, the issue is that both of these figures are made out of pretty dark coloured plastics, and the paint applied on top is fairly light, so any sort of rubbing on them you can see the plastic through it, and with these guys the noses tend to get worn away. So you can see here on the Imperial Dignitary the tip of his nose has been worn off and he ends up with a little black dot in the centre of his face, and this is an incredibly common issue. Here is another Imperial Dignitary and the exact same thing has happened to him, and the same issue happens on the Emperor. As you can see here, we've got a paint rub on his nose. He also ends up with little rubs on his hands as well, because those are painted in the same light colour plastic, and like the Imperial Dignitary, it's a very common issue. Here's another one with exactly the same problem. So what we're going to do today is work out the paint colours we need to touch up all of those issues. We'll start with the Emperor and then we'll move on to the Imperial Dignitary. So if we take a look at the two Emperor figures that I've got, you can see that predominantly it is just going to be a grey colour. So I have a black and a white Vallejo model colour paints here to mix together, but there is also a subtle tone to each of these, and that is the problem with vintage figures. Each one will age slightly differently, so the colour that you mix is never going to be the same for all figures. You're always going to have to mix something specifically for the figure you are fixing. So this one here on the left is predominantly grey, but I think we might need to add either a touch of yellow to it or a bit of brown. So I've got some gold yellow here to add to that one. This one looks a little bit more green, so I've actually got out some olive green, and I think we might just have to add a touch of that to the sort of grey base colour for this one. So yeah, we just got to sort of start mixing. There's no exact way of doing this, you just have to sort of do it by eye each time, but you can get an idea for the basic colour, which will be grey, and then you just add bits of other colours to it until you get a closer match. So yeah, let's mix up some grey and then we'll see which colours we need to add to fix the noses of these guys. Okay, so I've mixed up a grey, and you can see that this is just black and white mixed together, and if I paint that onto his nose, the tone is about right, but you can see it is not the right colour. There is definitely another colour going on in there, and I think this one is going to be a little bit of yellow. So let's add a little bit of yellow to that mix and see if we can get it closer. Okay, so I think I've got it right now. So that is black and white mixed together, and then to that I've added a very small amount of this gold yellow, which is a gain colour 72.007, and that has given me a grey which is just slightly tinted. So if I take a little bit of that on the paintbrush, and you can see here his nose, let me just paint that onto his nose. That is a pretty good match. By the time that's dried and we put a top coat on top of it, I think you will be hard pushed to notice that that has been painted. So as you can see, it's not a flat grey, it's a flat grey with a tint of colour, and in this instance a bit of yellow. So I'm going to touch up the hands on this one, we'll let it dry, and then I'm going to sort out the paint colour on this one, which I think will need a bit of green in. So yeah, a slightly different tone, but you can see that's what you need to do to mix these colours. So let's get his hands painted and then we'll sort out the nose on the next one. For this second Emperor, as I say, I think it needs a little bit of green added to it. So I'm actually going to use the colour that we've mixed up for the other Emperor and just add a tiny amount of this Vallejo model colour olive, which is 70.967. And I mean, it's just a very small amount of it, just a touch on the end of the brush. And I've mixed that in here. So it's gone a slightly different colour. You'd be hard pushed to notice, but I think this is what we need. So let's try this one on here. Yeah, you can see that is a very good match. So it's always about adding subtle colours. The basic colour to this is grey, but we've added a bit of yellow for one of them and then a bit of green as well to that yellow, and we've got another match. So let's get all the rubs touched up on this one, and then we'll add the top coat and see what it looks like. Once the paint had dried, I then applied this, which is a satin varnish over the top. Again, this is a Vallejo model colour. This is 70.522. The paints that I've been using are a flat matte finish, and that doesn't match the original finish of the paints that Kenner would have used. This just gives it a little bit of that shine that the original paints would have had, and you can see we've now ended up with two figures that are looking really rather nice. The nose rubs have pretty much disappeared, and you can see that's a very close match to the original paint. So I'm very happy with those two. Let's now move on to the Imperial Dignitary. For the Imperial Dignitary, we'll start the same way we started with the Emperor. So I'm going to mix up a grey, which is a close match to the sort of the tone of the grey of this, but you can see that it is not actually a flat grey. I think this has got a little bit of blue in it, so it's more like a duck egg blue. There may also be a hint of green in there as well. So let's mix up the grey, and I've got some blue and green ready as well. The green I'm using is the same one we used before, so it's an olive green. Then I've got a bit of this blue, which is Andrea blue, 70.841. I'm just going to mix it up very carefully and we'll see what happens. Again, both of these figures have a slight different tone to them. They have aged differently. And you can see this one has actually got quite a lot of sun damage and even some damage to the red paint underneath. So this one has certainly seen better days, but today we are just worrying about his nose. I won't bother touching up the red paint on that one. But yeah, let's get mixing and see if we can get a close match for the Imperial Dignitary's nose as well. Okay, so that's a pretty good grey match. It's about the right tone, but you can clearly see that it is not the same sort of colour. There's definitely another colour in there. I think that's a little bit of blue, so let's add a little bit of blue to that and see what happens. Okay, so that's with the blue added, and it isn't blue. You can see that it really stands out too much, so it must be a little bit of green. Let's remix that and let's see if we can get it even closer. But yeah, blue is not the answer. So there we go, that is it. I think I've cracked it. So it's a grey base with a very small amount of green, which sort of is hinted at by the colour of his eyes there. You can see he's got green eyes, so a tiny amount of green into that, and that is looking pretty good. By the time that's dried, I think that's going to match really nicely. You do have to remember that when you apply paints, they look a little bit lighter when they are wet, and when they dry, they darken down just a touch. So you always be prepared for things not looking quite the same once they have dried. But I think that is pretty good. So we'll let that dry. Let's deal with his nose, and then again we will put the satin varnish on, and we can take a look at the finished figures once all of that's in place. The paint's now dried, and I've applied the clear top coat, which is also dried, and you can see that that is a pretty good match. I think you'd be hard pushed to spot that those nose rubs had been fixed. And there we go, that is it for this project. Both of the figures are now ready to go back on display, and the nose rubs are pretty hard to spot. I think most people viewing these figures would not even notice that the paint had been touched up on them. And as I mentioned, if you're doing this on your own figures, there is no definite mix of paint that will match every single one. You're going to have to mix it yourself and see which tones you need to add to it to get it the right colour. Each of these figures ages in its own separate way, so some will be slightly yellowed, some will be slightly green. You'll just have to see what your figure is like and go from there, but using a grey as a base and then adding little bits of colour is the way to go. Hopefully this video has been of interest to you. If it has, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And if you've really enjoyed it and want to help out toy-polloi, then why not think about supporting me on Patreon. You get early access to all of my restoration videos and also access to an exclusive video series called On the Cutting Mat. So have a think about that, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos.